Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the shocking data behind a silent crisis that's hitting our education system. We're going to focus on exactly why schools face so many digital threats and how our centers of learning have literally become a primary battleground in the modern cyber landscape. So, let's kick this off with a question that might completely flip your assumptions about who hackers are actually going after. When you think of a high-value target for a cybercriminal today, who instantly comes to mind? You probably guess banks, right? Or governments, or maybe massive multinational corporations. But no, the real answer, educational institutions in India. They are facing an absolutely astonishing 8,487 cyber threats. And get this, that isn't a yearly figure. That's not even a monthly figure. That is happening every single week. In today's Explainer, we're going to unpack this David versus Goliath battle. We'll look at the silent wave of attacks, why schools are targeted, the anatomy of these threats, the human element, and finally, the real-world fallout. All right, Section 1, the silent wave of attacks. Let's just take a second to explore the staggering, almost unbelievable scale of this digital assault. The paradox here is totally startling. So, Indian schools face nearly double the global education risk. We're talking 8,487 weekly attacks, compared to the global education average of 4,368. But here's the real kicker. They face more than 4 times the attack volume of a standard global organization across all other sectors, which sits way down at just 1,934. The data from researchers is crystal clear. The education sector is literally the most targeted industry right now, easily outpacing even manufacturing and professional services. Moving on to Section 2. Why target our schools? So why exactly are our centers of learning and collaboration so firmly in the crosshairs of ruthless cybercriminals? It really comes down to the massive contrast between highly fortified corporate environments and, well, open, under-resourced schools. Think about it. Corporations completely lock down their networks. They have these high budgets and dedicated IT teams. But schools are fundamentally designed to be open and collaborative. For an attacker, that makes them a massive treasure trove of student data and original research. It essentially offers them maximum return for minimum effort. To really put this financial reality into perspective, an average K-12 school district dedicates just 8% or less of its overall IT budget to cybersecurity. And it gets worse. 20%, so 1 in 5 of those schools, spend less than 1% of their IT budget on cyber defenses. Because funding is incredibly tight, they're often forced to rely on outdated legacy tech. They just don't have the dedicated security departments needed to constantly monitor network access. So their digital doors are pretty much left wide open. Section 3, the anatomy of school threats. With those gates practically unguarded, we really need to examine the specific digital weapons being deployed against our educational institutions. The source data reveals a massive surface area for these attacks. Information disclosure is leading the pack at 74%. This basically means core infrastructure is fundamentally leaking sensitive student records and high-value university research. Right behind that, you have severe structural flaws. We're talking remote code execution at 62% and authentication bypass at 50%, which means attackers are essentially just waltzing right past the login screens. And then denial of service is sitting there at 30%. Once they spot those vulnerabilities, the most common tactic to actually get inside is phishing. And the numbers here are absolutely wild. 86% of business email compromise attacks on educational institutions over a studied period were carried out simply using everyday Gmail accounts. Attackers are just tricking unsuspecting staff and students into clicking on malicious links or fake updates, and boom, they hand over their login credentials. Then we have the absolute nightmare scenario, which is ransomware. This is malicious software that completely locks up learning systems and encrypts private data until a ransom is paid. Recently, this impacted roughly 80% of lower educational institutions and 79% of higher education institutions in just a single quarter in India. And to give you a sense of the global scale, between 2018 and 2023, ransomware attacks on schools cost over $53 billion in downtime alone. Unbelievable. And incredibly, for as little as $10, attackers can deploy a distributed denial of service, or DDoS attack. This basically involves overloading servers with so much traffic that platforms and exam portals become completely inaccessible. So yeah, an attacker with pocket change can literally shut down a school's entire remote learning infrastructure for the day. $10. The crucial takeaway here is that attackers rarely even need highly sophisticated, expensive zero-day hacking tools. They are increasingly relying on cheap, familiar methods to exploit basic hygiene gaps. They simply take advantage of a lack of awareness to slip right inside the network. All right, Section 4, the human weakness. Because technology is really only half the story, we absolutely have to talk about the human element in all of this digital transformation. The rapid shift to hybrid learning really changed the game. We now have teachers, staff, and thousands of students constantly accessing institutional networks on their personal laptops, tablets, and smartphones. This whole connected campus and bring-your-own-device culture has massively multiplied the risks. It expands the attack surface and creates countless new unsecured entry points right into the school's central database. Because schools inherently thrive on open collaboration rather than tight restriction, humans are often the weakest link. You've got a lack of dedicated cybersecurity training, the unsafe use of personal devices, completely decentralized networks, and a huge volume of young, unaware users. A single careless mistake, like an untrained student or a rushed teacher clicking the wrong link, can bypass millions of dollars of security software and open the door to a major breach. Which brings us to Section 5, real-world consequences and the devastating fallout. Ultimately, these aren't just abstract numbers on a screen, right? In India, the financial toll is just staggering. The data shows that each breach costs affected organizations an average of 35 crore rupees in damages. 35 crore! For educational institutions that are already struggling with super tight budgets, a financial hit like that is absolutely catastrophic. But honestly, the true cost goes way beyond the financials. It's measured in human disruption. We're talking about canceled exams, hijacked virtual classrooms where unauthorized users jump in and disrupt everything, and shattered institutional trust. Worst of all is the terrifying reality of a student's private identity being stolen to commit fraud or being sold on the dark web. It completely breaks the fundamental trust that parents and students place in these institutions. We really cannot afford to just react after the damage is done. As Sundar Balasubramanian, MD at Checkpoint Software Technologies points out, a prevention-first approach is no longer optional, it is foundational. It's absolutely essential for protecting the intellectual capital and trust of our schools. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. We've seen how our schools have inadvertently become incredibly lucrative targets for cybercriminals. So I'm going to leave you with one final thought. The next time you or your child logs into a school portal, ask yourself, is the digital foundation of your local school truly secure? Are those invisible walls guarding that data actually strong enough to hold? Something to think about. See you next time.